Hello, Winter Warriors. I am your host, Haley Shanley, and you're listening to the GPSV podcast. When in doubt, throttle it out. What's good, friends? It's Haley Shanley, co-host of the GPSV podcast. On today's episode, I'm speaking with a very special guest. He's going to tell us his story about the life-changing injury he sustained while racing in 2020 that ultimately altered the course of his life. But that is far from the end of his story. Now, he's still very involved today. I'm catching up with snowmobile racer Nick LaGoy to hear about his story through the injury, through recovery, and what he's up to today. You can expect to see him February 11th, 12th, and 13th at the 40th annual Grand Prix de Valcourt. Also has a history with racing this event. I'm going to catch up with him regarding that and so much more. Hope you enjoy this episode. Well, we're just going to hop right into it. So welcome to the GPSV podcast. I'm so excited to talk with you today. To the viewers to the listeners who aren't familiar with you, you experienced a pretty life-changing incident back in the 2020 season. So if you don't mind just hopping right into it, can you take us back to that moment and what happened?
Yeah, we were in the middle of the 2020 season, racing down in Boonville, New York, and we're just, it was a regular race day, and we had the fast sled. We were up front. The final came around, and just like every other final, you get your equipment prepared and you get out on the track, and we ended up getting the whole shot, and we led majority of the race. And then the second place contender was very close to us. We were kind of running like an inside and outside type thing. When we came up on some lap traffic, and that's when just some misjudgment. And we got into a pretty bad accident going into like turn one, and ended up breaking my back in a couple different places, and had to be like airlifted and stuff like that out. But it was a pretty stressful situation for a while.
No doubt. Obviously, you're dealing with the injury and the pain, but the mental side of it, like that's a whole nother story. How hard was it to stay positive throughout that process?
It was when I got hurt, of course, I was airlifted, and then I spent like a week in Albany Medical, just getting like our bearings and stuff like that. And even during that week, it really hadn't really hit me that it actually happened. I was paralyzed from like the waist down. And it still didn't hit me. And then even when I got out of Albany Med, we went to like a rehab center, one of the best ones in New York State. And even then I spent 3 weeks there, and it was just so not real. You know what I mean? It's almost like this is, I can't believe this happened, but how do you cope with it, and how do you do that? So basically, when I was in rehab, they wanted me they were pushing me to stay longer, and I'm basically just looked at them and I said, listen, are you training me to be in a wheelchair, or are you helping me so I can walk again? And they're like, no, we're training you to be in a wheelchair. And that's when it was kind of like real, you know what I mean? That this is, when they said that there's a good chance that you'll never be out of a wheelchair. And that's when it got real. But once they said that, I said, okay, well, I can figure out how to be in a wheelchair. I need to get back to my somewhat normal life. I need to go home. That was a big part, is being away. I run a business here, and being away from that atmosphere, the shop and stuff like that. That was what helped me move on, I should say. And it did get very real once I got home, just not being able to do anything on my own. And I'm kind of like the most, or not most, but I'm kind of very, very independent. Like I like to do things on my own, and I don't really ever need or want to ask for help. And then when this happened, it's like I had to ask for help for everything.
Sure. And, you talk about getting back into into home and everyday life. So in addition to the business, what's keeping you busy nowadays, and maybe how much has life changed for you in terms of, your hobbies and day-to-day life?
Yeah, I mean, life, it definitely changed. I mean, I had to move. I had to get a new house that was a single story and stuff like that. But the first, I mean, when I first got out of rehab, obviously I didn't have any real functions from my lower half, so everything was strictly wheelchair. So quickly, I decided that having somebody drive me around was probably not going to work great for me. So I ended up getting like a set of hand controls in a car and stuff like that. But just little things like that made it a little easier. Still going to the gym every day and working out, and even though racing's been my life for 15 years, and that's what we work for. That's what we train for. That's our entire life. When you're a racer, that's just what it is. And then to have that not be your thing anymore, it's rough, and it's definitely all a mental game for sure.
100%. It's hard for someone who hasn't experienced an injury or life-changing event like that to wrap their mind around. But let's go back to your racing career, those 15 years. Can you tell us, how did you get started in snowmobile racing, and just your career in general? What did it all entail?
Right. Back in the late 90s, my father used to race for Skidoo. Um, and he is kind of the one that, I always looked up to him, and I always, he's my idol, he's my best friend. So, I always thought it was really cool that he raced snowmobiles. I grew up racing like at the late model racetrack, asphalt late models. That's what my father did, is, when I was a kid. So we were always at the shop and stuff like that. Well, we ended up getting into racing what's called like a stalker. It's basically a trail sled that's lowered to the ground, meant for ice. It's got small skis and a studded track. And we did really well with it. And I was, ever since the first day we tested it at my house, it was just like an addiction that you can't, everything revolved around it. And we raced like 2 years of the stalkers, which was kind of like an entry level class at the time. And then, there is other stepping stones before you get into like pro champ and semi pro champ. And then our third year of racing, we decided to go get a champ sled, which is like, going from a go-kart to a sprint car.
Right.
It's a pretty big jump. So, and we just took what it could give us. It was an older sled, but we worked all summer on it, and we've never really had a huge budget for racing and stuff like that. And we made do with what we had, and we made what we had the best we could. So we ended up taking that older wall sled and just doing well with it. And we ended up winning a few semi-pro races with it that year. Eventually picking up some sponsors. The next year we got a newer wall chassis, and we started racing pro champ. And I was racing pro champ for about 10 years in the pro class. So.
Awesome. Well, and another part of your career too is GPSV. Can you tell me about your experiences there?
I mean, especially Valcourt was like our home track. That was always what basically the entire season revolved around. I rode for Skidoo for 90% of my career, and that was our home track. That was the closest to home. It's 2.5 hours away from us, and it was always just a gnarly weekend. They're like 100% we're racing anything with a motor. Doesn't matter if it's a lawnmower, a snowmobile, a drag sled. Everything that has a motor is going to get raced this weekend, and it's just the people there are like full blown, totally committed to it too. And that's the thing, is you can tell when you go to different racetracks. I've been to, 30 or 40 different venues across from here to Wisconsin. And it's, Valcourt racetrack they really, really know how to do it there. We've always looked forward to going there. We've always had pretty decent luck. I've won a couple Friday shows. I've won a couple Saturday shows. I've never had I've never had everything put together for a Sunday final to be holding that big trophy. But even with that, it's just that was one of my favorite tracks by far, and best put together venue, really.
Definitely. They do it very, very well on, in regards to every single one of the sports they offer. Now, fast forward to the 2022 race season. Do you have plans to still be involved in the racing space at any capacity?
I've been talking with a couple of the younger champ drivers. Something that I took very seriously was your fitness. Sometimes we didn't always have the best equipment, so I always made sure that I could, physically I was in the best shape ever, if possible, to just eliminate that as fatigue as a factor at the end of the race. So I've been kind of chit chatting a little bit and helping couple of the younger drivers with what their preseason is and stuff like that. It's tough. This is like the toughest time right now because normally I was involved with personal trainers and stuff like that and diet programs to get ready for the season. And this is like October 1st was the time it all started, putting together new wraps on sleds and making sure all of our equipment was ready to go. I think I'm gonna go to Valcourt this year. I think that would be great. I've graduated out of a wheelchair, so I'm now like up, standing. I wear a leg brace, but I can walk around with a cane. So that's kind of like pretty awesome. But
That's incredible. That was going to be one of my next questions is an update on how you're doing nowadays. That's a huge step and pretty remarkable considering the trainers were like, we're training you to be in a wheelchair. So that has to be a boost of confidence.
it is, and it's just it's amazing how you take for granted how easy your day is until something like this happens, and then you have to struggle to put socks on or brush your teeth even, and then I value life so much more now, and it just means a lot more. Even, going from month to month still, it's I can notice different progress. Like, I'm this month I can stand on my own and without holding on to anything and move my body around and just be able to balance myself. Whereas 2 months ago that wasn't possible. So it's a daily changing thing, especially when it comes to like nerves and stuff like that. So just keep going to therapy and keep lifting and keep working out, and it'll all be better.
Keep on digging. That's fantastic news. Well, more on the day-to-day life. You had mentioned a few moments ago the family business being in the shop. Can you tell us more about that? What is it?
I mean, we run a LaGoy's Automotive here in upstate New York. It's a full service repair shop. 3-4 bays. We got 4 or 5 guys. And we do a lot of custom work. We do a lot of like lift kits and big trucks and fast cars. So it's fun. I definitely had to learn how to work in a wheelchair. It's different, but I mean, there's no other choice. You don't have an option. And I can see how another person that with this type of injury didn't have something motivating them like a business or even a good support system like a family or something, how it could just not, it could be like devastating for your life. And the way I looked at it when I finally got back to the shop is this, even though it's me, I got hurt, it's a little bit more than that. It's I have to keep going, and I got to be strong every day because there's 4 or 5 people that depend on a paycheck, and they, it's not just my life anymore. It's these other guys that have been standing alongside of me the entire time. It's their family, and it's their paycheck and their income. So you got to be strong and just do the work. That's it. And with that is a little bit of a therapy in its own too. It's just being able to come here and really do what I love to do. It's not even really like work. I get to build cool stuff all day. So, I mean, that was a big part of not keeping me distracted, but keeping me busy through this. And it's just something that had to happen. So.
Well, that's what it's all about, right? Is when you're doing something you love, it's not a job, and it's really great to hear that it's been kind of a renewed sense of purpose and carried you through this time. Now, going back to sorry, I'm kind of all over the place today. Going back to going to GPSV to Valcourt this winter, you're hoping to. What are you expecting that experience to be like? Do you think it's going to be tough and emotional, or do you think that big family reunion is going to be very beneficial to you?
Yeah, I think it's going to be both. You know, it's tough, especially with social media nowadays. And I still am a big social media guy, especially during the racing seasons. A lot of times we don't race local anywhere in New York. So in order to get exposure for sponsors and stuff was social media. So now I'm battling with all the memories that come up, like this time of year, you know, pictures of the new sleds and workout routines, stuff like that. So that gets emotional because we're not doing that anymore. And it was, you know, my life for 15 years. But I'm really looking forward to going there and not like, you know, just having a fresh start, I guess. Just to be there with the sounds, the smells, you know what I mean? And the people, really, that was the biggest thing is the people that have, you know, I've grown up with for 15 years, and especially at Valcourt, you know, you get to know Wayne in the pits and, you know, all these different people that make it happen every year. And they, you know, they call you by your first name when you show up, and it's just it's a brotherhood kind of, you know.
It really is. I think what's cool about it is a standalone event. There's only one a year, yet you have this family and camaraderie that you typically get with a traveling race series where you're together all the time. So I'd have to echo your statement there, and that it's very much a fun family get together. The last question I have for you is, you know, injuries and risk are a part of motorsports. You never want to see it happen, but it is a reality. To any young or any athlete who does find themselves in that situation, they're dealing with a life-changing injury, what is one piece of advice, or maybe a few pieces of advice, you would pass along to them?
You just have to dig deep, and you got to stay focused. That's what I've, you know, even through it all, it's been extremely hard, but I've really tried to do better with my business and focus on the other things. You know, normally I'd be focusing on racing season right now, but that's not really a possibility. So you got to find something else to focus on. And not only does it keep you busy, it keeps you sharp, you know, and it keeps you in a good spirit. You gotta wake up and look forward to something every day, even if it isn't racing or it's helping somebody else with racing or something along those lines. You gotta stay in the groove, you know. You gotta be positive and be focused all the time.
Do you see yourself racing in para-sport categories?
I would totally try it. I have full function of my left leg, but my right leg is like I can lift it and stand on it, but I have no ankle. So unfortunately, I have no gas pedal foot or anything along those lines. I would 100% get in like a sprint car or an asphalt late model with hand controls for sure, if given the opportunity.
That's cool. True to your roots, the asphalt late model. It kind of gives you goosebumps hearing Nick talk about his injury, what he took from it, and how he stayed grounded throughout. It's very, very hard for me myself to imagine what that process must have been like, but very inspiring words from Nick. Again, that was Nick LaGoy, snowmobile racer. You can see him again this year, 2022, at the 40th annual GPSV, February 11th, 12th, and 13th. I will be seeing you there. If you haven't already, be sure to follow GPSV on all of your favorite social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and now TikTok. I'm Haley Shanley for GPSV Podcast. You can find all of our episodes up on Spotify. We are streaming en français and in English. I'm Haley Shanley. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the GPSV Podcast.